Good evening and welcome to the April 8th, 2014 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's tradition here in Downers Grove that we start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all rise, join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. April, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here.
Thank you. Before we begin with the rest of our meeting, we do have to allow Mayor Tully to participate via phone, so may I have a motion to allow Mayor Tully to participate in the April 8th meeting by telephone?
I motion to allow Mayor Tully to participate in the Village Council meeting of April 8, 2014 by telephone.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That matter passes. Okay, for those of you joining us live, we do have copies of our agenda and meeting materials on either side of the room. If you would be so kind, if you have a cell phone with you, to either turn it off or put it on vibrate, we would appreciate that. And we will start this meeting with item number 3 on our agenda, the meeting minutes. We have a council meeting of April 1st, 2014. Any additions, corrections, or amendments to those meeting minutes as presented? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Moving right along to item 4, public comments. This is the section of the meeting where residents can share their opinions and comments with us for matters not appearing on tonight's agenda. So if there's any comments, if you could please come down to the podium, give us your name and address. We'd appreciate it. And there are a few residents coming down.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, staff. Bill Waldeck, 1409 Willard Place, right here in Downers Grove. First of all, last month, Commissioner Durkin indicated a preference for keeping first reading and workshop type meetings in the council chambers rather than moving to another room. This appeared to be supported by Commissioner Olson as well, and I support that position. Moving in another room while still is technically transparent is not proactively transparent, and it requires the public to take additional steps to receive a reduced broadcast. So while okay for topics to be discussed face-to-face by council members, the chicken conventions were more about public input than council discussion. So while it is less formal, it does allow debate to degenerate. At one point, I thought the lady who brought the egg was going to go all Justin Bieberish on me. Please try to keep future controversial issues in the chambers. Also, to recap the last chicken convention, I noticed that the several attendees were concerned about the health risks of chicken farming to the neighbors. The health issues have been brought up many times, and the council has never addressed the issue at all. All the chicken farmers have to say is that there is none, despite warnings from the CDC, studies, and even chicken farming magazines. Why believe them, even given evidence to the contrary? A resident at the meeting stated that he lived next door to chickens, that they smell, and the smell ruins outdoor activities and enjoyment of his own property when he has company. Still, the council ignored his concerns and once again chose to listen to the chicken farmers who claimed their chickens' poop doesn't smell. 2 council members indicated that they opposed chicken expansion but were willing to do some compromise. 2 seem to prefer the compromise of neighbor consent. You have to realize that there is no compromise in this issue with neighbor consent, only capitulation. Commissioner Neustadt said he is going to mark it on his calendar to bring up the issue again. Commissioner Rankin said she too is putting it on her calendar to bring it up again. Now, when I sat among you some time ago, I would occasionally, such as budget or financial discussions, bring up our seniors, children, human services. Commissioner Barnett would criticize me for bringing up an issue he considered over and done with. Commissioner Neustadt castigated me for bringing up issues that were already decided. I guess it's wrong to bring up seniors and human services, but okay to bring up chickens until that particular faction wins. So 4 of you need to quash the issue now because there is no compromise, only delay. Based on the negative and disparaging remarks made about children and dogs, I do have one suggestion. It's based on the fact that children and dogs can actually be raised in a house. It's actually preferred. Maybe the real compromise is to disallow roosters, keep the same setbacks as current, and allow the chicken farmers to raise chickens in their homes. They shouldn't complain about comments. Comments made indicate they are better than kids or dogs. They don't smell, make noise, are healthy, and are lovable, and don't attract predators, despite all evidence to the contrary. So why do they need to place them away from their houses and closer to neighbors? So consider that, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark Garrity, and I live at 7348 Winthrop Way in Downers Grove. And I would like to address the issue of this resolution you're going to have tonight about the fair graduated income tax. Fears that this fair graduated income tax will have a negative effect on economic development and job growth in Downers Grove are misplaced. The median household income for Downers Grove in 2011 was about $77,000, a little bit under that. Only 8.9% of Downers Grove families have incomes above $200,000 a year. That's 8.9%, and that's according to census data, I think from 2012. Under Senator Dan Harmon's Fair Tax Plan, there will be tax cuts for almost all households in Downers Grove of between $300 and $400 a year. These tax cuts will be spent into the local economy, they can be, and they will stimulate local businesses and hiring. How much does that come to? Well, there's about 19,000 households in Downers Grove. If we gave each household a $300 tax cut, that comes to about $5,700,000 a year that can be spent here in Downers Grove instead of sent to Springfield for taxes. Now, Senator Harmon's tax brackets are on the first $12,500 of income, the tax would be 2.9%, much lower than the flat 5% it is now. On income between $12,501 and $180,000, the tax would be 4.9%. On income above $180,001, it would be 6.9%. To give you an idea of what those tax rates would be, if you made $25,000 a year, you'd get a $275 tax cut over what you're paying now. If you made $50,000 a year, you would get a $300 tax break. If you make $80,000 a year, which is a little bit more than the median income here in Downers Grove, you'd get a $330 tax break. If you make $100,000 a year, you'd get $350 back. If you make $200,000 a year, you would still get a $90 tax break, which is a pretty nice dinner for the wife and you and a bottle of wine. The third point here about tax brackets in the Constitution, I know there's some confusion about this, but we have no tax brackets for the flat tax in the Constitution right now, and we won't under the fair tax either, nor should we. And the reason for this is it allows the Assembly to adjust taxes, if that's ever needed, without going back to another amendment to the Constitution. You just don't want to enshrine a tax rate or a dollar amount in the Constitution. And I think Mike Madigan's plan for his millionaire tax is wrong. We shouldn't be putting that into the Constitution. It was a big mistake in the 1960s for Congress to peg the alternative minimum tax to $100,000. You know, back in the 1960s, $100,000 was big money. Well, that's middle income now, so we don't want to do that. But we do have these tax brackets as brought forth by Senator Harmon, and they will be the ones applied if we have this referendum on this November's ballot. Which brings me to November's ballot.
we, the voters in Illinois, have the right to vote on how we want to be taxed. And the polling shows, polling done by A Better Illinois, which is back in this thing, that 77% of the people in the state of Illinois support a fair graduated tax. Right here in Downers Grove, over 52% of the people support it. So we know if this gets on the ballot, it will pass. Now, 34 other states in the United States have a graduated tax. Even such liberal bastions as Oklahoma, Kansas, and Alabama. This is the only adult way to do this. We need to fix this problem. Now, finally, if the state assembly does nothing and the current 5% flat tax sunsets to 3.7% in January, they'll have to find another $3 billion worth of cuts in the state budget to balance it in 2015, next year. They've already cut $4.7 billion over the last 5 years alone. We're not talking about fat here. We're talking about cutting into muscle and bone. Now, if they have to go and find $3 billion worth of cuts, it's my guess the first place they're going to look is at counties and municipalities who have asked for it by passing resolutions like this. So I urge you to vote no on this resolution. It's really not the thing to do. It's not the purview of this council to be talking about that anyway. Let the state assembly do what the state assembly has to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Paul Kraft. I live right a block away here on 5133 Washington, apartment 2B, and here in the center of the universe, downtown Downers Grove. And I think I also support the fair tax. I think it's common sense. You put more money in the pockets of the citizens, and they have more money to spend on business, and that way we'll keep downtown Downers Grove and the rest of the country, the rest of the state thriving. Just give people money and they can spend it. Simple economics.
Thank you. Just to be clear, this item is appearing on our agenda later on, so there may be time for discussion, but I have a feeling that Ms. Crawford wants to add into it since we've already heard from two speakers. Well,
Merely providing an update of the chamber.
excellent.
My name is Laura Crawford. I am the president of the Downers Grove Area Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and our office resides at 2001 Butterfield Road in Downers Grove. First, I wanted to let you be aware that we are hosting on May 1st the Taste of 630. This will feature 30 different restaurants providing their delights right in the basement of Yorktown outside of Lucky Strike, and we hope that you'll consider joining us on May 1st. On May 7th, we are going to be hosting a golf outing at Seven Bridges, and we know that many of you attend that, and we hope to see you again this year. And on May 14th, we have a very important general membership luncheon. We'll be recognizing our Attainable Futures students. That is our sophomore program with District 99. And those students are provided 5 half-day sessions at businesses throughout Downers Grove, teaching them anything from business acumen, how to build a resume, how to conduct themselves in interviews, the importance of community involvement, and many, many other things. So we do hope that we see some of the village faces there. That, again, is May 14th at Seven Bridges, and it is our Attainable Futures Luncheon. All information on all of these events, of course, can be found at downersgrove.org. And I do want to also give you a brief legislative update that on a couple things that we're working on. I know obviously some of these were mentioned earlier this evening. But I'm providing these for informational purposes only. I believe that you have a letter that was sent by the West Suburban Chambers of Commerce that includes 20 chambers. Obviously, the chambers opposed that position. Very, very briefly, these chambers represent about 10,000 businesses in this area. 7,000 of those are S-Corps. S-Corps are required to provide their income on their personal income tax, their business income on their personal tax. Those are the easiest corporations to set up, and they're the easiest to depart. This proposal was also introduced with no plan or rates that were guaranteed, and I think the biggest component of this, that it was not associated with any accountability to reduce expenses. Secondly, I do want to mention that we also opposed, of course, Madigan's millionaire tax. So again, these are provided merely for informational purposes, and I appreciate your time, and I do hope to see you at some of the events. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any other comments or questions from members of the audience? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, council member reports. Commissioner Barnett, any report tonight?
I do not, Mayor.
Commissioner Olson?
No report.
Commissioner Jose?
No report, thank you.
Commissioner Rankin?
No report, thank you.
Commissioner Durkin?
No report.
I will add one quick report. It is this weekend, Masters Saturday, so I will be at home watching golf all day, but there's lots happening in downtown Downers Grove, including the Children's Easter Egg Hunt, sponsored and brought to us by the Kiwanis Club of Downers Grove. Mr. Baker's been kind enough to put up a little flyer that we received. Saturday, April 12th at exactly 10 a.m. In Constitution Park, right behind Lincoln Center, there will be a Easter egg hunt, which has been underwritten by Exit Real Estate Partners and Chris Hockstedt, great company in Downers Grove there, and a chamber member. It's a great event that's been going on for many, many years, and conveniently, right after that is the Really Big Trucks event, a partnership with the Village of Downers Grove, the Park District, also at Lincoln Center. Lots of great examples of trucks, equipment, municipal fun stuff for kids and adults alike. That will be at, I think that goes also from 10 till noon. Does that say it up there? Yes. There's also a pancake breakfast at the Downers Grove Christian School right next door to Lincoln Center. So we'll be right in downtown for all these great events on Saturday, this Saturday, April 12th. That's all I have. Mayor Tully, do you want to have any council member reports tonight?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Newstead. Appreciate it. Just want to remind everyone that the 100 Club of DuPage County, which supports law enforcement and firefighting personnel families, is holding its big fundraiser this weekend, Friday and Saturday, April 11th and 12th at North Central College. Hosting a night with Tom Dreesen. Tom Dreesen, of course, is the comedian that for many years opened up for Frank Sinatra. And it's called An Evening of Laughter and Memories of Sinatra. If you haven't already gotten tickets, you might want to hurry. The event's been featured on a lot of the local news channels, ABC included, and should be a great event, and it's for an amazing cause. So if you haven't already done so, please consider it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6 on our agenda, public hearings. We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move right into the meat of our meeting. Item 7 is our consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments from Village Council on the consent agenda? Questions or comments from the audience on the consent agenda? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.
Thank you, April. Item 8 is our active agenda. I'm looking for item 8A. May I have a motion for award of a contract for $3,645,000, $645,081.15 to A-Lamp Concrete Contractors, Inc. for the Brook Drive Center Circle roadway reconstruction and drainage improvements.
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments from the Village Council? Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm going to be abstaining on this particular item. I don't have any pecuniary interest in the contract, but I have run across this company in my day job, and I think it's best for everyone involved that I abstain. So thank you for your very thoughtful consideration. I look forward to the vote. Thanks.
Questions or comments from the audience on this item? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Abstain?
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.
Thank you, matter passes. Active item B, ordinance, is there a motion to approve an ordinance to grant a stormwater variance for 4924 Lynn Scott Avenue as presented?
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments from the council? Mayor Tully, any questions or comments on this one?
No, thank you.
Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstad?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.
Thank you. Matter passes unanimously. Item C, may I have a motion to adopt an ordinance establishing parking restrictions on certain portions of Bel Air Lane?
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments from the village council? Mayor Tully,
No, thank you.
any comments or questions from members of the audience? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstad?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The matter passes. Active agenda item D, may I have a motion to approve an ordinance establishing a no parking restrictions on certain portions of Concord Drive?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments from the council? Questions or comments from the audience? Mayor Tully, I didn't forget about you. Any questions or comments on item?
Thank you for not forgetting about me. No questions.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstad?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.
Thank you. The matter passes. Active agenda item E. I have a motion to approve an ordinance to establish no parking regulations on certain portions of Cross Street.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments from the council? Mayor Tully, any questions on this one? Comments?
No questions. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the audience on this item? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstad?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.
Thank you. That matter passes as well. Our last item on the active agenda, item F. Is there a motion to approve an ordinance to amend certain liquor license classifications?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments from the village council? No. I just wanted to add one quick one. Thank you to the Liquor Commission. I know this one came up kind of quickly. We are actively working and pursuing business and economic development opportunities in our village all the time, and this is a great opportunity for our community to add some license classifications and help some businesses move into our town. So we're looking forward to that. Any questions or comments from our audience? Mayor Tully, questions or comments on this item?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Newstad. Just want to echo your comments. I do appreciate we're moving quickly to accommodate an economic development opportunity.
Thank you. Have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstad?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.
Thank you. That matter passes, and that is the end of our active agenda. So now we're on to item 9, which is the first reading, and I'll ask Manager Fieldman to start with item letter A.
Well, there are several items on tonight's first reading. However, the first four are all related to one large public works project. In here to present background information on all four of these items is our Assistant Public Works Director in charge of engineering, Andy Sikich.
Good evening. As Dave mentioned, this presentation refers to the first four items on the first read, A through D, and it consists of the trade construction packages for the Esterbrook and Downers Grove Estates subdivisions. In 2014, we are scheduled to complete water main replacements, drainage improvements, and roadway reconstruction activities in Downers Grove Estates and Esterbrook. And for reference, these are located south of 63rd Street between Main Street and Dunham. This work was included in the CIP for 2014 as 5 separate capital projects, but they're being combined for cost savings, improved coordination, and resident convenience. As you may recall, back in January, we hired a construction manager, V3 Construction, to manage the construction of these projects as opposed to bidding each of them out separately to a general contractor. Subsequently, we issued a call for bids for 4 separate trade packages: the demolition, excavation, and underground package, asphalt, paving, and concrete package, landscaping package, and full-depth reclamation package. So several bids were received in each category, and staff is recommending award to the following. For the demolition, excavation, and underground, Austin Tyler Construction for $3,965,193.50. For asphalt, paving, and concrete, Geneva Construction for $1,941,236.05, for landscaping to Breezy Hill Nursery for $879,600, and for full-depth reclamation, Mount Carmel Stabilization for $197,968.90. It should be noted that each of these requested not to exceed contract amounts includes a contingency, but that contingency will only be used if deemed necessary by the village manager. The budget for these combined projects is $7,965,000, split between the Capital Projects Fund, the Water Fund, and the Stormwater Fund. And the combined total of the trade contracts, including the contingency, is $6,983,998.45, which is almost $1 million under the budget. And even after we pay for some material testing and survey layout, which will come out of that budget as well, we're still likely to be around $900,000 under the original budget. All these contractors have satisfactorily performed either similar work for the village of Downers Grove or for surrounding communities in the past. And we anticipate construction to start in late April, and it'll go all year and probably wrap up this coming November. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions? Commissioner Rankin?
So when you're talking about the $900,000 savings, does that include the V3 construction contract too?
That came out of a separate budget for professional services, and the V3 construction contract was in lieu of a resident engineering contract, so it was more of a wash.
Okay, thank you. That's great news.
Just at the contingencies, how do we determine what our contingency is in each contract? For example, I'm just looking through, the contingency amount is larger for the full depth reclamation contract than the landscaping package. So is that based on our judgment?
Yeah, it's based on our judgment. It's basically an overall $200,000 contingency, but the full depth reclamation package is a relatively smaller contract, and it's got a higher risk of what I would call potential for extras in the field. There's more unknowns, I guess, with that contract than the other ones.
Than the landscaping, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Brennan? No. Mayor Tully, any questions or comments?
No, I have none. Thank you.
I'll just say that these 4 items, are some great infrastructure improvements. $6.9 million. It seems pretty easy that we just talked about it, but it really is through a lot of hard work and hard planning, but also kind of aligns with our long-range plan and how we schedule, how our roadway maintenance plan has been working, and this kind of fits right in. I think this is year 2 of that kind of scheduled roadway plan, and it seems like it's moving along well, and to have a budgeted amount come in under and give us a little bit of a buffer, I think is a great start for this year's projects.
And a great example of bundling different projects to lower our cost and to reduce the impact in the neighborhood, which Andy mentioned in his presentation. So all in all, so far so good, and as always, we'll provide some updates via our website and resident e-news if you'd like to follow along there, and we'll see if we can hit these budget numbers that right now look really good.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
The next 3 items will be presented by our Director of Community Development, Tom Dabriner, and all 3 of these items concern a proposed Starbucks with a drive-through on Butterfield Road.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council.
Good evening, Tom. I asked you if you were ready.
As the village manager mentioned, the first item has to do with Finley Square and the potential development of a Starbucks coffee shop on the subject property, and that requires 3 actions: plan development, an amendment to plan development number 17, a special use approval for the drive-through, and a final plat of subdivision. And we'll show you those items in a moment. We are looking for approval of all of these items on the April 15th agenda next week. And that comes with the unanimous recommendation of the Plan Commission in referencing sections 28.1607, 28.1902, which is special use. First one was the plan development special use, and then finally 20.501 related to approval of the final plat. Here is the location of Finley Square. Let's take a little bit closer look. You have right there a 21.4-acre shopping center located in the northeast corner of Butterfield and Finley Roads. Let's zoom in a little bit. We have a site plan that actually shows some of the landscaped area, which is increasing, by the way, with this development. Obviously, we're focusing on the Starbucks in the southeast corner, but it includes, the Starbucks would be the fourth outlot in this case. The project itself, well, and here is the Starbucks, and you'll see drawn in some of the other lots that would be part of the subdivision. So right now we have one large lot with some assessment lots, a couple assessment lots, and we're proposing that this all be cleaned up into 5 lots, 4 for the outlots and then 1 for the rest of the center. This is a site plan showing really the Starbucks area. There would be some landscaping obviously involved there. This looks fairly typical. We did work very hard with the representatives for Starbucks on making sure that aisles aligned, making sure that we were addressing kind of a realignment of the outer drive aisle, things like that. And here is north elevation, which is how it would be seen from the shopping center, and then I also provided the west elevation, which is how it would be seen from Portillo's. Standard Starbucks building. Again, we're looking for an ordinance to approval of an ordinance to amend Plan Development 17. It would be needed to allow the construction of the 4th outlot, the resolution to approve a final plat of subdivision, which is needed to subdivide 1 lot and 2 assessment lots into the proper 5-lot fashion that we're looking for. And then approval of an ordinance to allow special use for a restaurant, which would be Starbucks. That's required because it has a drive-through, and drive-throughs are listed as a special use in the B3 business district, which is where this is. The petitioner did address traffic issues where Starbucks actually is a very complementary use in this center because the peak hour differs from the peak hour for the shopping center itself. We find, or the Plan Commission found that it complied with the bulk requirements of the zoning ordinance, that it was consistent with the regional commercial designation in the comprehensive plan, and that is why they were supporting this proposal unanimously. Be happy to try to answer any questions about the proposal at this time.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. I support this. I think it'd be a great addition to that part of the shopping center. I do have some concerns, and one of them being the amount of traffic and the amount of pedestrian traffic that's walking to those anchors that you just had up there. How is that being addressed? It's like every 5 feet you have a stop sign, stop for pedestrians, and all of a sudden it's just a big stop. How is, are we, because they are asking for the, I just went blank.
Plan use.
The plan use things. We can address this, or at least look at it, correct?
Just to clarify, are you talking about
Right
the east-west?
The whole strip between Bye Bye Baby and HH Greg. I mean, that is just a nightmare. And I know that so well because I got little ones and I'm forever at Bye Bye Baby. Just like the rest of 20% off coupon. Best Bath and Beyond, Bye Bye Baby. It just seems like it's just, I want this here, don't get me wrong. But I just have an ultimate concern over the amount of signage and potential danger, because during the rush hour or the lunch hour or whatever hour, that Portillo's is just jammed, which is great because, like I always said, you got a parking issue, that's a good problem. You got a traffic issue, that's a good problem here, but I'm just concerned about the pedestrian safety. And I'm just wondering if all that was being addressed or has it been addressed, has it been a concern outside of my own thoughts?
Yeah, yes, we can take a look at this issue as part of the Starbucks petition or just in general working with this property owner, which has been, that property ownership has been great to work with. So you heard Director Dabereiner say that the Starbucks itself is operated in such a way with a different peak hour that it's not likely to exacerbate any existing issues. However, if there's a general concern from any one of the council members about the existing operations, we would just start talking to the ownership to see if we could work with them to recommend some operational changes.
Could we
some
just
signage
do that, or
changes.
at least
Sure.
have staff drive through and maybe see what I'm, to me, it just seems dangerous. Just a lot of activity.
Yeah, we can work with Michael Casa, with Tom and his team and the property ownership to see if we can make some improvements there, sure.
And then last question I have, if you allow me, and I don't know the name of the street to the east, where the stoplight is between Toys R Us and H.H. Gregg.
Downers. That's
Okay,
Downers.
Downers Drive. Is there any plans to make changes to that stoplight? Possibly putting an arrow in?
You know,
Doing something, because I can just see as we get more and more of these A-plus stores that we have there, the more desire for people to be there. It's just gonna, it could be, whatever with the traffic, the peaks of the hours and stuff. It just seems like there's just so much activity there that I have an overall concern about it.
There are plans right now to consider some upgrades to that existing traffic signal. If memory serves, it might be an all-out replacement in a few years here. So we'll give Nan the opportunity to research that information and get it back to you by the end of the week with next week's packet.
Okay, because, to the business park to the north of there, Flavor Chem, I mean, we have such great advanced companies over there and companies expanding. There's just so much traffic in that little corridor that's all I got. A lot of traffic.
Commissioner Rankin?
I echo a few of your concerns. I spend more time at Toys R Us and Best Buy, and trying to negotiate that stoplight from either direction is kind of a nightmare. So if there is a way to improve that sometime down the road, I think that's great. This looks like a great project. It's going to add more green space to this big, huge parking lot, which is great. And it seems like you've thought out the flow of traffic pretty well. So it's like a benefit to Downers Grove. And I think the other thing that I read was that they're anticipating their biggest traffic time is breakfast time, which is when Toys R Us and all those places, hopefully, they're not going to open earlier, so it shouldn't conflict as much. So, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Olson?
Just as we're looking at this, remember we just approved a resurfacing in that whole street reconstruction area, and then the office park to the north, Flavor Chem and such. So, and I remember just looking at those diagrams, it went right down to right about that stoplight, just north of that stoplight. So I echo what Commissioner Durkin and Commissioner Rankin said, the concerns about the traffic in that area. It is bad. It's going to be an interesting Black Friday. It's always interesting there.
Commissioner Jose?
Thank you. I too share the same traffic concerns. There are a lot of folks walking back and forth, and you've got a lot of cars going in and out of there. I think the only improvement we could make to the project from my point of view would be if you actually put the Starbucks inside the Bye Bye Baby. That way you can go anywhere else to recaffeinate. But it is nice that I'll be able to stop and get a cup on the way home after picking up the latest trinket or whatever. I think it's great that we're cleaning this up to 5 lots, aligning it the way it should be. I think the special use standards are met. The additional green space is fantastic. So it's, I think, a very good project, and I'll be in support of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Tully, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Newstead. Number one, I think it's a good project. I think it's an appropriate special use for this location. Glad to see it here. And I embrace the comments that were earlier made by my colleagues regarding the traffic, but I am fully confident that we have the tools and the staff by which to work them out in the broader scheme.
Thank you. I'll just add that this is, it's another victory for us. I know I've kind of been on that roll tonight about positive vibes for the Village of Downers Grove, but it's it's not a joke, but there should be a Starbucks in every corner because we all use them so much. But this is an example of, obviously, Starbucks has done their research and they want to move and locate into this position. And I think that says something about not only the village, but this particular economic corridor that we have up there on Butterfield, that it is a growing area, and there is interest from a national company to continue, more national companies to locate there. So I think the traffic concerns are an issue, but if Portillo's is an example, they have worked with their site and modified and changed and arranged to make their site work. And I think that, I believe there's some Starbucks and Portillo's as neighbors in other areas around Illinois and other spots in our country. So I'm sure that they will work well together. And as Commissioner Durkin said, a traffic problem is not the worst problem to have, and I think we can certainly look at it. I would support Commissioner Durkin's desire to have a look-see at what can be done there as far as traffic goes. I see some other heads nodding to that, so I think we can have some consensus there. Thank you for all the hard work, Tom, and the petitioner for this one. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure that we will all be visiting it because it sounds like we all spend a lot of time there. I spend most of my time in that mall at Portillo's, to be honest. So. But there's no, I can go right from drive-through to drive-through. It'll be perfect. So. Any questions or comments from the audience on this item?
And then you go to Kohl's by the clothes.
Go to Flavor Camp. Seeing no questions or comments from the audience, if we could move on to the next item.
And I'll just send it right back over to Tom.
Thank you. An ordinance has been prepared to amend the zoning ordinance map to rezone the property at 2540 Burlington Avenue from R1 single-family residence to R4 single-family residence. You've seen a number of these recently. We are looking again for approval on the April 15th active agenda, and the Plan Commission did give this a unanimous recommendation. Just for orientation's sake, we're looking at a property that's located about there, north of the railroad tracks, west of Belmont, north of the industrial park. If we zoom in a little bit and take a closer look at where that property is, you see some of the darker yellow are the properties that have already converted to R4, so this is something that's happening in the area. We have R1 in the other areas. But the area is changing, and this is a property that was annexed into the village in January 1st, 2012, is that large amount of annexation that occurred that day. It was automatically zoned R1 per our code. If somebody wishes to change that, they have the opportunity to come in and make that request. That's happened here. In this particular case, we've got two lots with one house built over the property line, the two adjoining lots. What is being ultimately proposed is to demolish that house and then build two houses on the R4 lots, assuming the rezoning. And this provides them with less restrictive setbacks, of course, and housing that's actually pretty well in character with the neighborhood. Be happy to try to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the council? Mayor Tully, any questions or comments on this item?
None for me, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the audience on this item? Seeing none, move on to item I.
Item I is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance in its entirety. This is a high priority action item that we've been working on for over a year, and the village council's been considering at public meetings since December of last year. There's been many questions asked by the council, staff, and community members, and staff has done our best to answer those questions as they've come up. The questions that were asked just a few meetings ago were answered and were published along with the material here tonight. And really, this is just an opportunity, another opportunity for the council to talk about the policy issues that are embedded in this important document and to make sure that this zoning ordinance reflects the will of the council, the implementation of our comprehensive plan. So with that, Mayor Pro Tem, I'll hand it back over to you, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Dave. Questions or comments from the village council on this side? Commissioner Barnett.
Thanks, Jeff. I've got a little list, but I'm going to take off of where Sean started on some of the last subject matter. In section Article 12 in particular, you've heard a comment from me on occasion, and I think this is maybe an appropriate time to talk about it. I would like to find a way to, let me refer you to stuff. You guys remember what I'm talking about when I say administrative adjustments in the approval section? Dave helped me because I'm probably going to head off the wrong path, but you know what I'm talking about. In particular, recent history, we're talking about K Automotive and then again the Starbucks condition tonight. I'd like to have us consider trying to find ways to put in the standards for approval, for variations, for special uses, for those kinds of activities, the ability to, for this council, really staff, not so much this council, but really staff, to put before us kind of administrative adjustment sort of things. In other words, more open to, you know, if you want to put in Starbucks at the mall, but we know that a lot of our properties across town currently do not fit the model that we all said via TCD3 and via the comp plan we wanted to have for development. Rather than these sort of narrow, limited, well, if it meets the uses, it meets the, if it meets the requirements, it meets them, so they get granted. We should be saying to do that, to ask for the special use. It is a special use. We've deemed it special for some reason, mostly historic probably, but to some degree we're revising that. There ought to be the ability of the council, the village government, to say, if you'd like to do that, we can see that, but then here's a list of stuff. We've got stormwater issues, we've got pedestrian issues, we've got traffic issues. Those are all issues that from every residential lot to every commercial lot across the village are challenges. And we know we've got some best practices that we've spent a lot of time and effort as a community developing. I'd like to see us find ways within those processes of approval, compelling additional improvements. And compelling is not a great word, but here's the analogy I used when I was talking to Dave earlier. From where I sit, it appears over the last 4.5 years that usually these conversations are kind of a two statements of opinion and no negotiation, if you will. And I don't know why we, or a petitioner for that matter, would be interested in that kind of condition. We should be saying, all right, their request is like round one of the conversation. We get it, we understand, it fits what we'd like to do, but hey, here's a list of things that are really important to us as a village about development. And we need to find ways to integrate those into things beyond the immediate, you know, in this case, the immediate parcel. So to use the two examples, I talked about green space at K. We had no method of compelling additional green space. They met the standards, we had to prove it, we all nodded and smiled, even though we know we've got a big giant parking lot and very little green space. In this most recent situation, everybody up here, well, with the exception of Commissioner Jose, who really wants to move the store, everybody up here talked about the traffic, and I think everybody in town knows exactly what you're talking about. If you mention Toys R Us or you mention Bed Bath & Beyond, everybody knows that that intersection immediately north of Butterfield is a pain in the behind, and it's no good way to get out of there. You try and get out of Toys R Us, it's a disaster. If you add pedestrian traffic or you add any traffic to the mall, you're just going to make it worse. We should be saying to some degree, hey, look, we love Starbucks, we'd love it to go there, the special use makes sense, let's approve it. But mall owner, if you want the tenant, you have to consider this, this, and this. I don't understand why we culturally have avoided this, at least that's my feeling on it. We have avoided this for some time. And so, as it relates to the ordinance in front of us and our conversations forward, I'd like to see us look at this Article 12 in particular and talk about ways with which we can kind of empower the village to ask for and better negotiate for improvements that meet and fit with the things we've all said and reinforced time over time are really important. It's the first kind of issue. Much of this is technical cleanup, and a lot of it is implementation of best practices, but we still have this situation where there's variances that come up or requests for special use, and I don't like the constriction that we kind of have on that. There's an opening monologue.
If the council were to support Commissioner Barnett's position on this description he just gave, or the objectives he's laid out here tonight, there would really be a sort of a twofold approach. The first step would be to amend the standards for special use approval that appear in the draft document to make sure that those standards capture the objectives that Commissioner Barnett's talking about. So there'd be some tweaking to the standards to make sure that the village is within its rights and backed by the zoning ordinance and therefore the comp plan to include those kind of conditions that relate to the special use that's being requested. So step one would be to relook at those standards and make sure they reflect what we're trying to achieve. And then the second step is probably the more important one, and that is to really apply and interpret those standards in a more broad fashion. Now, this is something where each community can apply the standards in a way that works for their community as long as it complies with zoning law, and there's a wide spectrum of how different municipalities apply those standards. So The first is a technical issue, amend the standards to make sure we have the right legal footing, and the second is really how do we apply and implement those standards going forward.
That to me almost sounds like a mini action item within the zoning ordinance. I know we've gotten to this point, and we're actually trying to wrap this one up to get it so we can move on to some other items. I'm wondering, Commissioner Barnett, if you would be interested in moving forward with this and then using that action item in the action long-range plan, or pardon me, long-range financial plan process, long-range planning process. What do we call it now? Long-range planning process. Thanks. As an outlet to kind of do some of that research that Dave's talking about and give us some ideas and maybe get some more examples like the Bill K or the Starbucks to see what's out there. I understand what you're saying, I see it, but my perspective too is that while I think that we have our standards of approval, they're probably pretty middle of the road as far as some of the communities in DuPage County and around, and that may benefit us as far as attracting and retaining some businesses. I do value the idea of trying to get a little assistance in some of these bigger projects, and a traffic light certainly would be a big project, or a stormwater project would be a big project, but I just want to make sure that we're not adding any extra barriers or any extra.
Well, it goes hand in hand with two things. One, one of the drivers, and part of what the driver in my mind is, there's a pretty substantial change in structure relative to the process as it relates to ZBA versus the Planning Commission. And so that's part of why, I mean, if I were a petitioner, about the last place I'd ever want to land is ZBA, just because of the finality of it. It's a tough sort of spot to land when you're trying to accomplish something. It is what it is. It's a structural process. It's a statutory process, and I get that. But if I'm trying to do something, I don't really want to be there. I'm going to try real hard to avoid that. And so part of this, in my mind, is looking back at taking off on the idea of the administrative adjustments is how can we better facilitate that? And so, long-winded, not answer your question, Jeff. Yeah, could I go forward? Yeah, probably. Now here comes the wise guy from the end of the aisle. We got a list we're not getting through. We got an EDC issue that I asked to talk about, and I flipped out when everybody said it was February, and now it's April, and we haven't touched it yet. We've got stormwater thing that's in front of us, which is very similar to what I'm trying to get at here. It's a pretty substantial code review and overhaul, but it affects, like this, everything that comes before us keeps going forward without doing this. And so I can respect the idea that there's a lot of work and we'd like to wrap it up. I also would suggest if we did nothing with this document for 6 months, we would still function. We have been and we would continue to. So if we thought there was a way to get something like this in, maybe there's no support for this, that's possible too, but if there was, trying to get it in there now and costing us some time, to me, is a better course.
I think, aside from the time issue, I think we do, if we go forward with, if we're interested in exploring what Commissioner Barnett is proposing, I think we do need some additional time just from the standpoint of, I really think that this is a change, and we need to engage our business community and, whether the economic development and such, because what I would hate to see this is perceived as there's more regulation, it's more difficult to open a business or more difficult to expand a business in Downers Grove. And so that's what I would want to avoid. I'm open to what Commissioner Barnett is suggesting, but I also want to be really mindful that we shouldn't. I think the burdens to business, to opening, or to expanding, or to changing how their business may, their site may be used, I don't want to be so overburdensome or costly. That's what I want to avoid, and I think there's a way to do that, but it's certainly, I think we have to engage multiple stakeholders to make sure that we're approaching it in the correct fashion. So, whether that, I don't know exactly where, how we best do that, but we do need some additional time. We'll take additional staff time. We'll take additional resources.
I got something, but there's people want to chime in.
We'll go down this way first. Commissioner Rankin?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I understand where you're coming from. I think I would prefer, and maybe this is part of your plan, that there would be parameters in place, you know, for if staff was going to be asking the petitioners to do certain things to improve the situation, or if, you know, it came to the plan commission or council level. I guess I'm worried, you know I've said this before, but we've had certain life experiences as a business owner where we didn't know we were petitioning to do something and we could not find out the rules, and it seemed like the rules changed as time went on. And I would be afraid of the uncertainty of someone who's trying to build a business or do something in our town where they aren't sure of the rules and they aren't sure, you know, how expensive a project's going to get due to maybe a certain staff person or however that person's handling the situation. So if there were parameters in place.
Yeah, there would be. That's what Dave was talking about when he said,
Yeah.
first you'd have to deal with the criteria. And that's what I'm saying right now. It doesn't necessarily reflect any of the goals that we have out there on those three big subjects that are kind of always in front of my mind. And then the reason I started with using the administrative adjustments as an example, because that is a very narrow, specific list that somebody can understand on the front end. You know, it's not just what does a staff person happen to decide today. There's a list there.
Yep.
And so it's an expansion of that in an attempt to include some of our village goals. You guys are probably getting tired of me saying this, but I keep feeling like we keep cementing situations that we've said when we're in unspecific we don't want. We say we want this aspect relative to stormwater, we want this aspect relative to traffic, we want this aspect relative to pedestrian accessibility in sort of this ambiguous planning mode, right? But then we get a petition in front of us for a certain thing. If they include it on their own, that's awesome. We're excited about that. But we don't necessarily compel it. And so then how serious are we about those goals? I mean, you're right. Everything I'm talking about likely adds cost to a project. There is no two ways about it. But we've said that that's important to us. We've spent an enormous amount of consultant time and resident time saying this is the stuff that's important to the village of Downers Grove. This reflects the priorities of our residents. Unless, of course, it's not convenient to a particular petition.
Well, you just want to make sure, I guess, that you don't tip the scale the other way, where you require so much that someone says, you know, I just don't want to do business with Downers Grove. And, you know, that's what I'm worried about. So maybe the parameters, there's also a level of investment, or maybe there's incentives. If you do so much, we're going to reduce your permit fees. Or, I mean, there's got to be some creative and thoughtful ways to achieve what you're saying.
Those are totally valid concerns. I get it. I'm in the same shoes you're in. And I just put up a building for my business. I get the idea of burden from the community on development. But I hate the idea that we're continually cementing conditions that we say we don't want. We do that all the time.
Yeah.
Commissioner Rose?
Thanks. I also share the concerns about the barriers to entry in terms of a business coming to Downers Grove or expanding in Downers Grove. And I think that we do need to, as Commissioner Olson said, engage other folks, the EDC, the chamber. If we're going to have that discussion, I think it's a longer-term discussion. I'm wondering to what extent we have this authority already. 'Cause we place conditions on special uses. It seems almost everyone that comes through. I mean, certainly we can do some of this already by just ramping up enforcement, right?
Yes, we already have the ability, we already have the typical standards for special uses already in place. We've applied them in a predictable manner, and it allows us to place conditions. So point one about making sure the standards are correct, I would say we're there now, and what's proposed also there. It's really more about the second step, and that is how do we as a community choose to interpret and apply, and to what degree do we place conditions, and how broad are those conditions? How is it a strict interpretation? Is it a wider yet legal interpretation? And that's where sort of preference, culture, and general accepted practice of a community comes in. So yes, we already have the ability to do these things anyway. It's just a question of how far do you want to take it, and does the new ordinance reflect what we intend to do?
which opens the question that Becky raised in terms of uncertainty. Now, businesses tend not to like that sort of thing. They want to know what they're getting when they're moving into town or expanding in town. So
And just to further that point, with our current ordinance, we wouldn't necessarily have to make any amendments to the standards to broaden the application of conditions and what the types of things those conditions address. The key to all this is making sure you stay within legal parameters as to the impact of the special use and how the standard's being applied. So, perhaps if the council wanted to further explore this issue after tonight's discussion, we could get a couple of examples from other towns who have the same or similar standards and choose to apply them in a slightly different manner in a broader application.
Greg, you raised a good point about, competitive nature of the environment and burdens to entry, and that's all important. So, at the risk of sounding like I'm asking our group here to restart a process, I'm not. But some input on other communities would be useful and helpful. It's kind of like the stormwater thing. I just think that we're, from where I sit, maybe it's just me, there's not enough outside of Downers Grove input into what we're doing. And there's an enormous amount of outside Downers Grove input into the things that we've set as priorities and goals. And so I'd like to know more about that. And this right now, when we move over to ZBA for that process and the finality of that process, and we don't have sort of a more flexible built-in process ahead of that, I'm worried about kind of what you're talking about. If they can't fit within 10% administrative, then they're stuck with what? Hoping a council person comes up with a text amendment or they go to ZBA? There's some danger there too.
Certainly.
And so some outside, at the very least, I'd hope we'd get some additional outside input into what other communities are doing before we head down this road. That's a substantial change in process.
No, and I'm fine with having the conversation. I get concerned about the list that you mentioned in terms of, we've got a lot of other things that we'd like to talk about. And I think at some point we reach a saturation point for staff. I mean, there's only so much RAM. We're taking longer than anticipated with this discussion. We're taking longer than anticipated with the chicken ordinance discussion. We've got facilities planning going on, and we do want to get to the stormwater issues, the right-of-way standards, things like that. So I wonder if there's not some merit to Jeff's point in terms of maybe making it into, I don't know if mini priority action item is the right term, but I think it does deserve a longer discussion, but I also don't want to grind everything to a halt while we're doing that. So I wonder if it's not better to move forward with the ordinance as it is, with the idea that we're coming back to this and that we want to do it in a good and comprehensive fashion.
From a staff perspective, the key here is that we should expeditiously move along the zoning ordinance approval. Yet we can still make sure we have this conversation if the council wants to. And the way we do that is by separating the two items that I just talked about. The first is to quickly compare our proposed standards to the standards throughout our region and probably throughout Illinois. And I think you'll find that the standards for special uses are nearly identical. And that allows us to, if that's the case, approve the ordinance because our standards are pretty much in line. And then it's really about getting on the same page as to how we apply those, creating that certainty so petitioners know what to expect when they propose to develop in Downers Grove, and making sure we hit an application that fits the expectations of our community and the council. So what I'm really saying is we could take a pretty quick look to see how our proposed standards compare, and if they are in line, then we could choose to operate differently, and we could move incrementally as petitions come through us as we go. We have several in the last couple months here. So we can address this issue, should the council want to, pretty quickly by just comparing our standards to other existing standards.
I guess one question I have, or one comment in line with what Commissioner Jose was getting at, is that our staff internally does kind of do the dance a little bit already. I'm going to go way back to when Bentley moved to the south side of Ogden, and they needed some stormwater detention, and they put it in the street. I believe they paid for that infrastructure improvement. am seeing Dave's head nod, or there was an agreement, there was some sort of.
Right, they reimbursed the village's TIF district, which originally paid for that improvement when they did not perform according to the terms of the agreement.
Maybe not the best example, but we do have those conversations. They do happen, and I think that it is part of the negotiation, and I think that those conditions do happen where needed. So, from my perspective, I still think moving forward with this, we've been talking about this particular item since December 17th, the zoning ordinance rewrite, and I think that it's been very due to have that time. We've had a lot of good conversations and a lot of great questions that have come up. This is a very specific and very good topic. Even tonight, we've had some good conversation about it. So I'd be interested in learning a little bit more to hear the special uses are the same. I mean, we have to remember we have Tom and Dave and others in community development, that this is kind of where they started and where they still are. So we've got some experts right here in our staff. So I personally am leaning towards moving forward with the ordinance approval and having some further conversation about this item. I guess we got to ask Mayor Tully, or do you have another comment?
Well, I
Mr.
just,
Rankin?
and maybe I'm not quite getting what you're saying, but when you said you're going to find out what other people are doing with special uses, you're also going to find out how they deal with perhaps asking for petitioners to do more, not just what other people are doing, right?
What we'll do is we'll show you the standards, and then we'll show you, you'll find that they're pretty similar. And then we'll show you examples of different special use ordinances where some communities choose a narrow interpretation with minimal amounts of conditions, and some communities take a broader approach with a lot of different conditions, like architecture, like bulk, like design, like off-site improvements. These issues are in front of us now in other petitions that are pending. And so really what we can do is very quickly determine whether the standards in this ordinance allow us the opportunity to operate either as we currently do, or as Commissioner Barnett is suggesting we might want to make some changes to incrementally.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Mayor Tully, comments on this item?
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's comments on this long discussion. First and foremost, I think we should expeditiously proceed to adopt the zoning ordinance update that's before us. It is a long time in coming, but that being said, there's no reason why we can't revisit it in less than another 50 years. In fact, we should. And on that note, I don't have any problem with revisiting what standards ought to be in terms of if we want to expect more and demand more, but to the comments that were made by Commissioner Lincoln and others, I think it's critical that we set expectations and we set reasonable expectations so that folks that are coming to do a project understand what our expectations are, what is to be expected of them. And 9 times out of 10, they're fine with that as long as they know what to expect and can plan and can budget accordingly. What business despises and what labels one as an unfriendly business community is when the rules of the game change throughout the process, because that causes delay, waste, and unnecessary expense. So I think we should go forward with what we have. It's a terrific update that's long overdue. I have no problem at all if we want to look at different categories where, as Commissioner Barnett mentions, we have a list of issues or a list of stuff that we want to look at raising the bar. That's fine, but I think we need to spell out what that heighten the bar is and set some reasonable expectations. And quite frankly, there's no reason why we shouldn't more frequently revisit these issues anyway. It took us way too long to update our comprehensive plan. I don't mean the process, I mean just because it wasn't done since 1965. Likewise with the zoning ordinance and like the sign ordinance and other things, we didn't wait until it was an item of perfection. We got a darn good piece of legislation out, and then we made sure that we committed to revisit it whenever it made sense. In terms of modifications, I don't see a reason why we couldn't follow that same path here.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett, you have more to add?
Yeah, I got a couple of specifics. I mean, obviously, it sounds like the general concept is not finding favor with my colleagues, but I've got a couple of specific elements in this section I wanted to touch on. Can I do that still?
Sure.
Article 12?
Yeah. And if people are wondering why I took so much interest in this article compared to some of the others, is because, you know, Jeff, you talked about some of our staff's experience. That's obvious in the bulk of this document. It's really well done, and there's a ton of good thought in there. What I'm talking about now is really the process by which our government interacts with its people. It's a little different than some of the technical aspects of this other stuff. The rest of this is a really well-done document. The first thing is, I guess it's 12, turn back to the numbers. It's 12, it's on page 12.4, additional public hearing notices. That first paragraph, A, one or more of the following additional notice of public hearings. It seems to me like we ought to require 1 and 3, just, and then, you know, if somebody wants to do more of the others, fine. But as I look at those things and try and think about the things we experience all the time up here, which is people saying they didn't feel like they got enough notice, blah, 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 it's why, you know, Greg brought up the issue of circle, which is what that map's for, which is great. But I don't like the idea of one of those things. I think we ought to compel more of those. Next page, 12.5, the conditions of approval, I. This is going back to the point I was trying to get at, which is that created or aggravated language. Anne's just looking at me like I'm crazy, because I am. But that's sort of the heart of the problem. If we have a very short, narrow list of ways that they meet the standards, and then the created or aggravated, all of a sudden we're kind of binding ourselves to not talk about some of those other things on the list. So I'd like us to consider whether or not created and aggravated really needs to be in there. Now, I'll send Dave some other comments that he can circulate, but then one more that's in similar kind of general theme here. This is on 1219, 120802, or 1208B2, which you have to turn back a little bit for. But I'd like to explain why we would want to sort of restart non-conforming uses. If I'm reading this right, it's sort of, if you go back to 11.4 and 11.5, it provides some conditions by which non-conforming uses that have previously been abandoned in their use can be reestablished. I'm wondering why we'd want to make that what feels like so easy to do. If they're non-conforming and they've been abandoned, why are we wanting to make it so easy to reinstall? And then the last thing is, there's several places where conditions for approval is described. At 1219-070L is one. And where's another one? I don't know, there's 2 or 3 of them in there. But I'd like to consider adding, I'll end that paragraph, and to carry out the stated purpose and intent of this zoning ordinance. I don't want to add it right there, but I'm wondering if there's some way within this review and approval procedure section to make reference to other village planning documents. Now, maybe there's a huge reason not to do that with the comp plan, but I'm thinking it ought to be part of what's going on when we consider review and approval, particularly an appeal process kind of a review and approval, that there be some consideration given to the long-range planning. It's referenced in their general village plans, is kind of referenced several places, but I'm wondering if there's a way somewhere within this section 12 to include reference to the comp plan. Again, the idea that somebody, you know, it's probably my own communication failing up here, but I heard a lot of my colleagues, including the mayor at the end there, talk about how we want to make sure people aren't, you know, the process isn't changed along the way, not even a part of what I was trying to suggest. And that this inclusion of the comp plan, you wouldn't want to be coming into town looking to do something and then finding out later that there's this other plan that somehow you missed or didn't get mentioned. I mean, our staff generally says it, but let's tell people, hey, you know, the zoning rule is a zoning rule, but there's this other document that has a lot of bearing on what we try to encourage and try to help promote and try to have happen. If you're coming into town, you may or may not ask for the comp plan, right? But you're going to ask for the zoning rules, the building codes. Yeah, sorry.
Commissioner Rosé.
Thanks. With regard to notice, are there situations where we wouldn't necessarily require the sign on the property or the mailing of notice?
No, those are required in all hearing cases.
Okay. Because I guess reading the section, it's like G2A, does say will endeavor to provide or require, okay, so that is mandatory then? That these 1, 2, and 3, the posting of the public sign, the mailing of the notices to the subject property owner, and the mailing of the notices to property owners within 250 feet.
The sign, the newspaper notice, and the mailing of notices to a minimum distance are all required in all cases. Expanded notification occurs on other certain triggers, which now I'm reaching the limit of my memory of that presentation, so we need a refresher on that. We could get Tom back up at the next meeting to do this.
But the expanded notification you're talking about turns into the neighborhood meetings and things like that, right? Okay.
Yes.
And that would be a commercial or industrial development next to a residential area, that sort of thing. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that the sign and the mailing at the very least were mandatory.
Correct. Sign, mailing, and newspaper
Well,
notice.
So why don't we just say the village will require instead of endeavor to provide or require? Why don't we just say the village will require the applicant to provide, and then not one or more, but the following?
And that's kind of where I was going.
I mean, the village will require the applicant to provide the following, 1, 2, and 3. Maybe I'm
unclear,
misreading it,
yeah.
but it looks like there's some things that are kind of optional if the village works hard enough to try and make it happen. I wouldn't want anybody, I want everybody to know they got to do those things.
Yeah.
Sounds to me like we've got some more questions, and Bob has a couple he wants to give to Dave, so perhaps we can get those to the manager tonight or tomorrow, and then perhaps have some answers by next week or when the staff is available to answer those, and see if we can make some of these language changes, or at least understand what the language change may entail or cause.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
I just wanted to address the exception with the non-conforming use. I guess I would differ from Commissioner Barnett. I think the reestablishment of an abandoned non-conforming use, the conditions are, in my opinion, I think fairly stringent. I mean, there's 5 conditions. The subject property not be reasonably economically used for a conforming use. It's equally appropriate. It's not going to result in greater adverse impact. It's not detrimental to existing character of development. It's consistent with comprehensive plan. You know, it's my view that those conditions are adequate.
You could make those same claims about a piece of property that's currently conforming in an attempt to use it non-conforming. You can't per our ordinance. But if we wouldn't allow that, then why do we allow the reinstatement of a non-conforming? Somebody can't take a conforming use, use that criteria and say, I'd like to make a non-conforming use. It's not permissible. So why, if we don't allow that, are we allowing this?
Well, I think from my perspective, you know, if it's something that perhaps, you know, a transfer of ownership where it's abandoned technically for one day, something of that nature, you know, I'm concerned about a topic like that where you have a large facility. And one of the non-conforming uses that comes to mind immediately for me is University Plaza. Whatever the credit card thing in the back there is a non-conforming use. If it were to transfer ownership, it could be considered abandoned. I wouldn't want to prohibit a business from opening there, prohibit the landlord from getting a business to open there, despite, you know, perhaps we might wish there to be redevelopment, and perhaps that may be being pursued, but I don't want to be overly burdensome in a case like that, where it's not creating a whole lot of problems as it is right now. It's creating value to the community, it's creating jobs or building tax base, and so that's why I'm concerned about making a change to be more stringent than the existing conditions.
It's always easier to talk in specifics. I'm glad you brought that, because that's exactly the kind of thing that we just differ on. I would suggest that kind of use should, if we've decided it's a non-conforming use and it's abandoned, then it ought to not happen anymore. If we meant for it to be a conforming use, then we should adjust this thing to allow the activities that are going on. What is the purpose then of defining these non-conforming uses? We're defining them because they don't fit within the current zoning rules. But why don't we make them fit in there? We could do that right now with this document, because we don't want them to be in there, right? So when they are abandoned, why are we giving them opportunities to restart? It is a burden, you bet. Bet you it is, just like many of the things we do. But it gets back to that thing, are we serious that we don't want that kind of use there or not? And apparently not so much.
So this topic is one of the fundamental changes between the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance. Through our comprehensive planning efforts and our look at the zoning ordinance, we found that we have, you may remember Tom's presentation on this, our current ordinance from the 60s is a greenfield development ordinance, and it suggests that you're starting with a clean slate. Now we're a mature community with lots of existing buildings, some of them desirable, some of them not so desirable, and we have a lot of non-conforming situations. One of the primary objectives of the new ordinance was to recognize that we have non-conforming situations and to create vehicles and standards by which we could allow or continue to allow or allow expansion of non-conforming buildings or uses, recognizing the mature nature of our community. So this is basically one of the key issues here that we're talking about. So perhaps we could have Tom, will recirculate the discussion we had on that. It's one of the first ones we had probably 4 months ago now, and kind of reframe the issue and see how Commissioner Barnett's topic that's being discussed here tonight fits into the overall goals of what we're trying to achieve with the rewrite.
And maybe telling a story like you've done in the past to help illustrate, these are some examples of how this would.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always better ways to talk about stuff. You know, when you bring that up, that's a great way to start to really frame it in.
So we've got a little bit more work to do, some questions and some reframing of stories that we've heard, so we can hopefully get to a point to make a final decision on this ordinance rewrite. Any other questions or comments? Mayor Tully, any other questions or comments?
No further questions or comments. I've enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, a good conversation tonight indeed. I believe that ends our active agenda.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mayor.
We are now on to item 10, the mayor's report. Mayor Tully, any report for us tonight?
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. And first of all, I just want to thank my colleagues for allowing me to participate telephonically. For those who don't know, the reason I'm not there is I am down in Springfield. Actually, I'm speaking to you from the governor's mansion at the very moment. Trying to find a quiet place to slip away and remote into our meeting tonight. Down here with the DuPage Mayors and Managers Organization on one of their multiple drive-downs to Springfield to lobby on issues that are of importance for municipalities, both including Downers Grove as well as many of our neighbors in DuPage County. This is the biggest drive-down that's done every year, and there was no one that my daytime job would allow me to make. So I am down here, and again, thank you for allowing me to participate tonight electronically. Just real quickly, I want to let you know that so far it's been a very successful drive-down. This is day one. Day two is tomorrow. We've been able to touch base with all of the representatives and senators that serve the Downers Grove area with respect to various issues in our legislative platform. Obviously, public safety employee pension reform is a key issue, as well as protecting local revenue. Some other bills that we had a chance to talk about today are including our opposition to House Bill 5485, which unfortunately passed to the House but is now in the Senate. This is the one that would require minimum manning for fire, making it subject to collective bargaining and interest arbitration. Also, there's some related legislation that would also limit local municipal control and self-determination in terms of how we can best manage our means to maintain service levels and yet reduce costs. We're making sure that the representatives and senators are aware that self-determination is a key issue to municipalities in DuPage and elsewhere, and that literally they need to make sure that they're not putting obstacles in our way or hamstring our ability to manage our affairs in the way that we think is in the best interest of our shared constituents. One thing I would point out that we did come down here to try to support passage of Senate Bill 3016, which has to do with confidential employees who participate in a environment where they might be exposed to collective bargaining discussions and yet being in a union. Unfortunately, it looks, and things happen quickly in Springfield, like that effort is probably not going to last much longer. which is too bad, but I think we're getting some good traction on some other bills while we're down here, including one that would affect our neighbors who are non-home rule, allowing them to perhaps use a portion of their hotel motel sales tax in order to put that towards non-tourism uses, such as roads and other infrastructure that would support hotels. So far it's been a good effort. We have some meetings tomorrow, both with members of the press locally and more regionally, as well as leaders in both the House and the Senate. And so we're continuing to press our mission here on behalf of legislative parties for Downers Grove and the rest of DuPage County. I will be happy to fill in everyone on more details next week as part of my mayor's report, but I wanted to give you a highlight so far. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 11, Manager's Report.
No report tonight.
Item 12, Attorney's Report.
Thank you. 4 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance amending the Downers Grove zoning ordinance to rezone property located at 2540 Burlington Avenue. An ordinance approving a plan development amendment to Plan Development Number 17, Finley Square Shopping Center, to allow the construction of a coffee shop with a drive-through at 1500-1570 Butterfield Road. An ordinance authorizing a special use for 1500 through 1570 Butterfield Road to permit the construction of a coffee shop with a drive-through use, and a resolution approving the final plat of subdivision for 1500-1570 Butterfield Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 13, Council Member New Business. Any council members have new business? Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Neustadt. On the agenda is a resolution proposing an amendment to the Illinois Constitution to provide for a graduated income tax. And before I actually move the item, I just wanted to give a little background about why I was introducing this at this level. I believe that this issue is an important issue for our residents. It has a significant impact to the residents and the businesses in our community, and I think is a major issue in attracting and retaining both residents and businesses to Downers Grove and our entire state. I think that economic development is always a focus of this community, and believe that we need to remain competitive. And thus, I decided to bring this forward as an item of new business. I think as Laura Crawford, the president of the chamber, stated, the impact on small business of no set rates and no accountability to reduce spending is really dramatic, especially for small businesses who do represent many of the businesses that we have in our community. And I'm very concerned about driving people and jobs out of our community and out of this state. I was able to attend a summit this morning with the DuPage Business Council to talk about the impacts of progressive tax or other tax proposals, tax reform proposals on businesses, and appreciated that opportunity and noted that a number of business leaders from throughout the county were very, very concerned about proposals to have a graduated tax. Thus, I thought it was very relevant and important that we have some discussion about this. I've talked to some residents and colleagues about this, and we've had some folks in the audience speak on this already, and I don't want to preclude anyone in the audience the opportunity to speak on this further. But what I'd like to do is I will move the resolution tonight. Hopefully we could have some discussion, and then I don't foresee, I would not like to take a vote on the resolution tonight, if that would be the will of my colleagues. So with that, I'll move to adopt, and then after the discussion, I intend to present a motion to table. I'm not presenting any motion right now, but at this time I move to adopt a resolution opposing an amendment to the Illinois Constitution to provide for a graduated income tax as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion fails due to lack of a second. Any other council member new business? I have no new business. Mayor Tully, any other new business?
No new business. Well-run meeting.
Thank you. Item 14, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you for your time tonight.